Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and mute people. And if you need to say something, feel free to hop on in. But I'll mute you if you're not muted already. Okay. All right. So before I go into materials, I just kind of want to quickly, portrait workshop in pastel, because I was worried about people's drawing. Oh, of course, my internet's unstable. Sure. Okay. If I pop off, if something happens, just stay in the meeting. We'll all kind of meet back up if something happens. And if something really bad happens, I'll reset my box. So if I'm out for a minute, it's because I'm resetting my box. Anyway, so that's why we're combining a little bit of drawing and a little bit of pastel. So if you're not comfortable with the drawing portion of it, throwing in color is going to be really frustrating. So I just kind of want to like ease us into the concept of it. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you in the past, some of you probably have seen these before. So this is the charcoal drawing I did of my son before I did the painting of him, called Live Music. Now, this one in particular, when I did this, I took the photo reference. He got this guitar for Christmas his 8th grade year. I didn't paint the painting until August, September of his freshman year, after he had gone through marching band and all this. He just changed so much. So when you look at, by the way, the Windows update I am not a fan of, because they took away the pictures. So I used to be, all my files had picture previews, and now my files do not have picture previews. So I have to look for words, which is not what I do. I look for. Here it is. So then this ended up being the actual portrait of him. So, we're not stuck to following exactly the photo reference. This is one of Gabby. I really kind of love that expression on her face. That was just so her. This was a few years ago. She was in one of her little ball gowns, and
we're just seeing I'm just seeing your son still. I'm not seeing any other photos.
Oh, okay. Hold on. We're probably behind them. Well, let's give it a second. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. All right. So what do you guys see now? Still Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me check my.
Is everybody else experiencing? I guess we all see the same thing.
Yes, at the bottom there's a box with more pictures with his car. I don't know if it needs to move to the right. I don't know. I don't think we can do it.
Say that again.
Underneath Sam's picture, there is a looks like the box with 3 pictures of Santa's guitar and one lighted.
Okay, so I'm already on Gabby's picture again. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording for a second. I'm gonna stop the recording for just a second, and then I'm gonna go reboot my box, which means we're gonna be kicked off for a second. If we need to run a few minutes late, I'm happy to do so. So just hold on, just give me. Okay. Anyway. All right, so today it's all about charcoal drawing. We're going to kind of work out our kinks. we'll go over quickly the list for anybody who hasn't had any charcoal drawing with me. I'm going to spotlight myself so everything is a little bit bigger for you guys. Okay. First, well, you know what? I'll go through the materials first. All right. Paper. I like to work big, especially for charcoal drawing. I feel like you just have a lot more room to get all the details that we're not working with pencil. We don't have a tight tip, but we can move a lot of things around. So I like Strathmore charcoal paper. This is one of the links that was sent out. And what I like about it, newsprint is somewhat okay. Just seeing if I had anything good in here. Newsprint is somewhat okay, but you don't get the same crispness and the same effect. So here's a boot we did in class one day up at Ocean County. I just like to keep it as a general sketch pad. If you take the paper out and mount it to the board like I have done, just make sure you have it on the right side. There's two sides. The only way to tell is just kind of compare it with how it was laying in the pack. Next, we have paper towel. Any paper towel will do. I have Bounty because that's what I have upstairs. So 1 or 2 paper towels, always necessary. When we get going, I will show you why. Vine charcoal. Comes in little sticks. You have a soft, is the skinny one, and a medium. Soft and medium. I use medium almost the entire time. It's just a nice medium to dark gray. The softer one gets a little bit darker for when you do need that. They come in a variety of sizes. You can get fatter ones if you want. But pretty much once we get down to business, it's this. No compressed charcoal. If you used compressed charcoal for this, you'll be making a big mess and it's not going to be fun. Vine charcoal, once we tone our paper, it's movable. If you use compressed, you're just going to have black all over the place and it's not really movable at all. So I'll get into toning in just a second and what that means and why. These are also, this is what I use to tone the paper with. You can tone your paper with Vine. If you didn't get these or you don't have these or whatever, it's fine. The Vine will work just fine. These are just a little bit cheaper and they do the job. So I'm all about saving a couple bucks. Still have my Huggies because your hands get really dirty. The white
Renee, will
vinyl
this work?
They look really dark. Does it say compressed?
Not in the box anywhere. Blick pastels says square charcoal.
Square charcoal. Okay, well, you know what? Since you've taken the drawing class with me, I would try it in a corner, see how dark it is, but don't do the whole paper just yet, to see how dark it is. And if it's, you'll just have to try it out. I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to tell on camera. White vinyl eraser. Kneaded eraser, a little chunk of kneaded eraser. This one's old, I have to warm it up. If you like blending stumps, more than you use your blending stumps. And I also have a eraser pencil. So it's in the shape of a pencil, but it's an eraser. I love this when we get down into the tight details. my skewer for measuring and for checking angles. Oh, artist chamois. I don't use it often. If you want one, use one. The paper towel does a lot for what I need. The chamois is great for taking off big swaths of charcoal if you need to erase a bit. I think that's about it for materials. Did anybody have questions on materials? Any other questions? Okay. So, yeah.
I have the soft. So that's all I have, the soft vine.
Soft vine, okay. That should be okay. Just when we're toning the paper, which is what we'll do first, and I'll show you that, just be gentle-handed. Watch what I do first, and then but you can use that. That'll be fine. If you get a chance, get some medium, fine, and you'll be good to go. Just the softer, it's just a little darker, so you'll just be, just watch your pressure and you'll be okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is tone our paper, and toning the paper has nothing to do with making the paper gray, because I've had a lot of students ask, well, can I just go buy gray paper? It's not about the gray, it's about the movability. So once we tone our paper with our 2 layers of charcoal, everything we do is easy. It's movable. We can wipe it away. You can start over. You don't have hours of erasing to do. It's just, if anybody ever has done a life drawing session where they do the 2-minute warm-up drawings, you have a series of 5 2-minute poses and you're drawing figures really fast. You draw a figure, you wipe it away. You draw a figure, you wipe it away. You're not wasting paper and time and setup. I'm going to switch cameras to show you my easel, and we'll go from there. I got to turn it back off and on. I think I moved it. Okay. Oops, wrong way. Okay. So as you can see, my paper is the big paper. It's 18 by 24. I have it taped up to the board. This is a newer board, so hopefully I don't have any big divots in it, because I normally keep my paper in the pack to protect it from any weird divots. So when you're drawing, when you have like a weird line that shows up because of something that's underneath it. There we go. So I'm taking this charcoal first. And yeah, see, on camera it looks pretty dark too, Patty. You might be okay. In person, if I were to describe this, it's like 2 steps darker than my sweatshirt. It's not black by any means. It's not black. So hopefully this sound doesn't, hopefully there's not a weird sound. So I'm going to take this. We're going to be doing this twice. See, there's a tape mark. I'm toning the whole paper just in case. I'm probably not going to draw this large, but so coat 1 is on. Then I take the paper towel, circular motion. Rub it into place. We're going to do that one more time. This piece of charcoal has some sharp edges to it. You can, there's little lines on my paper. It's all right. So then blend it or wipe it one more time with your paper towel. So now the paper is toned. And I'll just show you quickly why this is important. So if I start to draw, I don't like it. All gone. I can start over and do something else. I don't have to sit there and erase and do all kinds of other things. It's basically gone. When we need to get those bright highlights, we are not using a white charcoal or anything like that. We will use our eraser to get back down to the white of the paper. Okay, so that's why the different types of erasers are important. As we're going, the kneaded eraser, you can see it's not quite as bright, but if you get it dirty, then it takes away even less. So I'll use a dirty eraser from time to time just to kind of move things around. And then when we go into details, I've got my little eraser pencil to do that magic for me. So take a minute if you haven't already, go ahead and tone your paper. Let me know if you have any questions or problems with your toning. And again, we're just putting this lovely little layer of charcoal down, and then everything can just kind of glide on top of it. I'm so glad to be back working with you guys again. I had quite a few plans, things I wanted to accomplish while we were on break. Needless to say, I did not get through nearly as much as I wanted to, because apparently I need more people around me. I was all like, oh, this will be great. I'll be by myself in my studio working. Not so much. I have a lot of projects planned, but I hadn't quite started them. So jumping back into the new year with charcoal is perfect. I do like to loosen up with charcoal. It is nicer, a little more forgiving. I also, when I do a charcoal drawing, I don't necessarily consider it to be a finished piece ever. It's just a practice piece. Very rarely do they get framed. Even if I like them, I just leave them be. Quick note, if you do like your charcoal drawing a lot, you are more than welcome. It is a perfectly acceptable medium, obviously, so you can spray it with a spray fix. No damage there. It'll make it a little bit darker, but that's okay for charcoal. You're not worried about coloring or anything like that. So if you are keeping them, if you like it and you want to keep it, I highly, highly, highly recommend spraying it with some sort of a fixative. If you keep it in your sketch pad that it came in, over time it will rub and it will ruin. It's not that stable. So if you like it, take it out of the pack and spray fix it and keep it someplace safe or frame it. Okay. How's everybody doing? Is everybody's paper toned? We're good? Okay. So this was the photo of my grandfather. As you can see, it's okay in terms of quality. It's a really old photograph. As I said in my email, this photograph right there, that's my cousin's head. My sister was sitting on his lap, and my sister's 5 years older than me, and she was maybe 5 at the time, so I might not have even been in the picture yet. So the quality of the photo isn't the greatest. I was able to blow it up. I don't have the original sitting here. I was able to blow it up to have a little bit more information. But I did have to just kind of sketch in what I believed would be the top of his head. That's something that happens that we don't necessarily realize. Sometimes we get a photograph and we think it's wonderful. And then when we start to work on it, we realize you either have missing information or something's not quite right. So I think I can pretty much fudge how his head is. Another thing that we kind of don't really think about much, his eyes were crystal clear blue. Like they were freakishly bright blue, like so bright, you know, it's crazy. But in a photograph, whether his pupils were dilated or just the lighting and whatnot, we don't see the color of his eyes. Based on the size of what I'm going to do, we can probably work that in there at some point. So everybody, I hope you have your photograph ready. Another thing to think about when you are doing portraits, the human head is about 8 inches, do this, like 8 inches from bottom to top. So when you're doing an adult, it's best if you can keep the head almost life size. It just helps with your drawing. If you go too much smaller, it's a little more, it ends up being a little more impressionistic because you can't get every little detail in there. If you go too large, it can be a little awkward. Children's and toddlers' heads are about 6 inches. So just kind of keep that in mind, just a generic kind of spacing. So that'll be good to know for when we get to pastel next week. I am working on 11 by 14 or 16 by 20 pieces of paper. I know the sheets don't come in those sizes. So if you don't have something that large, it's okay. We can work with that. But just for ease of creating the correct size, as I just talked about, the 8 inches, the 6 inches, I like to have a little bit more space to do that. I have done smaller portraits and they've come out just fine. But if you have a little more room, the better. You can purchase sheets of 18 by 24 and cut them down. Work on 12 by 18. That'll be pretty good. A little skinny, but it'd be pretty good. So just to kind of keep that in mind. For next week also, I have sets of portrait pastels. If you don't, just start to kind of think about, do some tests. For instance, this is my yellow tray. Within my yellow tray are tons of skin tones. There are also tons of blonde hair tones. So take a minute within the next week and decide which of your yellows are skin and which of your yellows are Caucasian skin, I should say, and which of your yellows are blonde hair. There is a very subtle difference between the two, but certainly take the time to figure that out if you don't have a portrait set. Pastel pencils will also be coming into play, and or hard pastels like your new pastels. I have just some kind of portrait-y colors that I'd chosen a while ago. Oh, the camera doesn't automatically do a zoom in on it. As you can see, I've sharpened the edges, the points just a little bit for when I'm working on portraits. We'll talk about that next week, but just so you're ready for that. Okay. So I think I'll tape him up. Sometimes I have a habit of starting it with the reference in my hand, and then I end up regretting that because when it's in your hand, it's hard to get the right angles if you're checking angles. Okay, so when we were in class doing the 6-week session, like I said before, we did eyes 1 week, and then we did nose the 1 week, and then we did ears at all different angles and all different things. And there was pretty clear steps as to what was step number 1 and what was step number 2. This time, it's not quite as clear. There's not, let's put it this way. There is not one set in stone step number 1. It's sometimes I start with the eyes. Sometimes I start with, it's dependent on the portrait, on the picture itself. For instance, if it's a really super close up and the person's eyes are glorious, I might start with the eyes. But when anybody that was in still life, we picked one object, right? And then we measured off that object to create everything around it in the right proportions. I'm not going to do that with the portrait. I'm not going to pick, okay, I'm going to set his ear. So you could. But I'm going to start with what's called the outer envelope. The outer envelope is something that can be applied to anything that you're drawing or painting. And that's just the entire thing that you're working on. So if you're working on still life, if you're looking at it, it would be, your fruit bowl to the candlestick and around it, you have the outer envelope and you fit everything in there. Now you've got your candlestick and your pieces of fruit, and you can work in it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide how large I want his image to be. I'm going to say this is the top of his head, and I'm going to say 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About here is where his chin's going to be. So that's pretty big. But I'm also doing the top of his head to his bottom of his chin. Now, I did not get out my ruler and measure that. That probably looks a little closer to like 12 inches or something. These lines may adjust. These are not set in stone. That's why we're working this all out. So I'm just gonna roughly take a look. I'm only looking at the outside of things. I'm not measuring anything just yet. This class is going to be a lot of, you'll see me wipe away a ton. You're going to see me erase a ton. You're going to see me go back and forth. And you're going to hear everything I kind of go through in my head to get this all figured out. Now, see, I did that, and this is where I initially marked his chin, right? I'm going to leave that there because I'll make some decisions as I go. I never expect this first round to be perfect. I never expect to have it right out of the gate. I know there are people that can do that. But those are people that do nothing but draw or do portraits and things like that. So I am happy to take my time and kind of figure things out little by little, inch by inch, square by square. You can erase things with your hand, or you can erase things with your paper towel. For right now, I will certainly ignore any wrinkles, although he doesn't have much at this age. He was still pretty good to go. I'm going to now start to get a little more serious. Got the skewer out. I'm going to start to check angles and such. Oh, see, now I think I'm going to go even higher. So I will probably end up having the right height. Okay. Now, this is more of a 3/4 view, right? So when you look at the typical, when we did our Iron Man mask, think about the Iron Man mask. you can start to place things, you know? So you can kind of work out generically where everything's going to kind of fall into place. I'm going to let you guys, I'm going to pause. Why don't you guys kind of work on your outer envelope and placing, this is his eyebrows. Eyebrows are to the top of the ears, although it's got a swoop down based on the angle of his head. So it's not a straight line right now, right? Just start to analyze the tilt. You got to look at, is it a straight on portrait? And chances are it's not. Even if you think it's a straight on picture, a lot of times it's not necessarily straight on. There's a little tweak or a little twinge. So just start to work out how they're turned. I want your outer envelope and just kind of work where their features are. I'm going to pause here. I'm not going to keep going while you're working. That way you don't miss anything, because you're going to see me mess up a lot. You're going to see me change things a lot. Yeah, this is one of those, just kind of keep going back and forth until you get it to work. I'm going to pause the recording while you guys work. All right. How'd everybody do? They're okay? All right. So again, we're not ready to fuss. We're not ready to muss. We've got our outer envelope. And like I said, even though I said I wasn't going to, I am going to use his ear as my unit of measure. So what that means is I've determined I'm pretty happy with the overall size, overall shape. But now it's time to start checking things. Now it's time to start marking things up. If we've done still life with me, it's the same thing. No different. I'm picking a random object and I'm going to go with it. Sometimes it would be, I always like to do a baseball first, like a whole little baseball setup for one of the still life classes, just because a nice round simple ball is perfect to start your units of measure. So what that means is I take my skewer. We know sometimes this gets a little confusing, so I'm working on how I explain it a little bit better. So this is obviously smaller than the drawing is, but what I do know is if I say, okay, here's his ear. So his ear on the photograph is that big, right? It's that long, I should say. I'm taking note as to the tip to the bottom of the lobe, so I could go a little bit crooked. So that's, I can set, that's the size of his ear on the photograph. So I'm going to take that information. I'm still have that marked. And on the photograph, I'll say from his chin, 1, 2, 3, about 3.5 ears from chin to top. So then I go on my drawing, getting those same points, that same angle, tip of the ear to the lobe, got it marked. And I totally forgot how many ears it was. Hold on. What I just said. 1, 2, 3.5. Okay, so 3.5 ears. So I've got my measurement. 1, 2, 3. Look how short I am. I've got to add. I'm going to add. So let me get that mark again. I'm going to double check it because you'll see me do this 1,000 times on things. I check the measurements. 1, 2, 3.5. So I'm going to make, oh, you can't even see it. Hold on. There you go. I made a little mark at the top of the page. That's what gives me 3 ears. Okay. I'm not going to go in and make huge adjustments just yet. right? Because I'm going to check some more things out. I want to see what else is not quite lining up. So I've got that mark right there. I know that I could raise everything up. All right. So the next thing I'm going to look at, we're going to go across. Simple. We're going to make a nice little T. So on my photograph, I've got my ear measurement. I'm going to go across. So I've got 1, 2, 2.5 across. So let me see how that works out. So I have that measurement. So I've got 1, 2.5. So we're not quite in proportion. Now that I see this is off here and this is off here, I'm going to make his ear smaller. Instead of making everything else bigger, I'm going to adjust the size of his ear a little bit. And then I'll start over, because everything else, I kind of like the size of his head. I don't want it to get that much bigger. I'm going to leave that base. So I'm going to get rid of those lines. Now I'm going to take a closer look. I think the top of his ear was a little high anyway. So I'm just going to shrink it down just a touch. All right. Nice jawline. Bottom, top. Now I know it was 3.5 to the top. So 1, 1, 2, 3. And it's a little short. A little bit longer. Oh, that's actually kind of a good marking. All right, so here we go again. 1, 2, 3.5. Woohoo! Much easier than making a whole new head. Okay, so let's go across. I still might have to make an adjustment going across. 1, 2. It could go a little wider. And if I look at his hair does come out a little bit there. Okay, so take a minute, do those 2 measurements, top to bottom. So figure out what works for you. I don't know what you're looking at. Each of you have a different photograph, right? So I happen to have his ear there to make it work. So pick a point. Maybe you sketched in their mouth. Use the mouth. So just find one facial feature to work it out. If you need help, let me know. You can email me what you have and I can maybe help make a suggestion. I'm going to pause it for a second, the recording. All right. Everybody kind of have their T basically measured? Okay. So the next thing I'm going to look at is I put this line based on the ear before. So I'm going to get rid of that line. That line was basically for eyebrows and whatnot. So here's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to start to place some of the features, and I'm going to place them not to any degree of finish. Please do not get obsessed with completing the eyeball. I know it's really tempting at this point, but it's just like in a pastel painting. If we are going and we have layers upon layers to do, if you 100% get this one eyeball done, and it may not even be right, it is so much. So please take it step by step. Please do not get ahead of yourself, because you'll be shooting, well, not shooting yourself, but you'll be kicking yourself, I should say, when you are trying to make all kinds of adjustments. So I'm still going to use his ear. His ear is it. That's the unit of measure. So I'm going to start down here with his mouth. You can start with whatever feature you like. I like to kind of go from simple to complicated. So if I get his mouth set and I get the basic shape of his nose set and the location of everything set, then going into the eyes. That's what I'm comfortable with. I don't want to go straight for the eyes. Quite frankly, the eyes always terrify me. And that's what makes a photograph or makes a portrait painting. In this particular painting, what's going to make this truly my grandpa is that little half smile, because he never smiled big. he was a quiet man, and he has the right side of his mouth is just cocked up just a little bit, give him a little crooked smile and a little twinkle in his eye. That's what's going to make it him. And so as I build up to it, I just really want to take my time with that. So I'm going to start with the mouth. A couple of things are going to happen and a couple of adjustments are going to happen all at once. So I need to see how big his mouth is in comparison to that unit of measure of his ear. So I set my unit of measure on the photograph. Then I'm going to set it kind of on the same angle of the mouth and see where we go. So it's approximately 3/4 of the size of his ear. So what that means for this is I'm going to start here with the overall size and the overall angle. This line is not right. And I know that for a fact because I just placed it where I thought it's probably going to go. I just wanted to set the size. So many more adjustments are going to be made, right? So I want to see how many ears it is from this little corner of his mouth to his jawline. It's almost not quite a straight line, but it's pretty darn close to a straight line to get to this little curve in his jaw. So I want to see how many ears that is. So if I go get my measure, now I'm going to go straight from the corner of his mouth. Ooh, look at that. It is 3/4, just like the size of his mouth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work backwards. Now I put it past his jawline. So if his jawline's right here, now I know his mouth is going to end about right here, which makes this wrong. Now I'm just going to take a little bit of that off for right now. Okay. And I made this line straight. I know it's going to curve. I know it's going to curve up a little bit. I have to do the bottom next. So I'm going to look for the bottom of his chin to that line of his mouth. Oops, measuring the wrong thing first. Hold on. Get ahead of myself. So there's that. Set it in the. Now I'm taking note as to what part of his chin. Ooh, I have to fix that first. So I'm looking to the middle of his lip and where it falls down onto the chin, it's on toward the one side. This, if I were to do that, that's already his jaw. So I have to make another adjustment. I have to kind of step back for a second and maybe look and see how many ears down and across. I've got the angles of everything correct, but his chin isn't quite right. So let me fix that first before I put anything off of that, right? So stepping it back, got the ear. I'm going to go with the angle of his chin. So his chin is about half an ear across. Well, maybe it is right. It's not that wrong. It is a very slight difference. I'll adjust his. There we go. All right. I'm going to leave that be. I'm not going to fuss too much. It's not really that wrong. So I'm going to leave that be. Now I'm going to look again for it's about half an ear. So when I do portraits and such, this is one of those things where I cannot, oh, that works. I cannot quite have music on. I have to have all my concentration because I go back and forth and back and forth. All right, so that's pretty set. I'm not worried about his lips yet. Not at all. So I'm going to pause again. I know that seemed a little tedious, but take a few minutes and set your first feature. Whatever you decide your first feature is, whether it's their nose or their mouth, take another few minutes and set that first feature. All right, here we go. So the next thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to keep going up his face a little bit. So this was the initial nose mark that I made, but just at a general observation, the tip of his nose comes pretty close to that side of his mouth. So it'll need to come down. I know it'll need to come down. I also observed from the photograph that his upper lip is pretty thin. So while this is just the center line, it could also represent his upper lip. As we get into the finessing side of things, we'll get to that. So I'm going to get a measurement to see how far the tip of his nose is from the tip of the top of his mouth. So get my ear again. And then I'm going to go. So this is a tricky one because it's not a very big amount of space. So I'm kind of going, let's see. 1, 2, 3. It's a fourth. It's about a fourth of the ear. So 1, 2, 3. So getting that fourth in a non-mathematical way. So that's his ear. So I kind of have to just move my fingers around until I get an actual fourth. 2, 3. Still too much. 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2, 3. That's about right. Okay. That's about right. So again, lots of measurements will be made. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of an outer envelope of his nose, and then I'm going to come back and measure it. I'm going to get rid of this center line because it's going to distract me, even though it's faintly there, but I'm just going to kind of wing it for a second, right? And see where the tip of his nostril falls. So if I take a plumb line and just see straight from that corner tip of his nostril where it falls on the mouth, it falls about right here. So I can do that. I know there's an angle from the bottom tip of his nose to the bottom tip of that nostril. I'm going to look at that angle. So his nostril needs to come down a little bit, right? Very tedious things we're doing today. Very, very tedious. That looks a little long. Or maybe not. So one thing I can measure before I go too far, I'm kind of winging it, but I'm noticing just with these few marks, it's changing things already. Like it's already moving away from being my grandpa and moving into being somebody else. So I have to adjust that. And the one thing is, I think, no, maybe not. All right. I'm going to measure the width of his nose from this corner, the side to the tip of the nostril. I'm going to measure that. It's about 2/3. So if I know that this is right, because I did that plumb line down, I know the tip of his nostril is basically right. So I'm going to take the tip of his nostril and go 1. So it, ooh, that doesn't seem, oh, okay, yeah. All right, so what I have to remember is the little things that I've done, which is, I said this is the line of his mouth. This doesn't include the whole smile that comes all the way up here, right? So his nose is a bit wider than I have it. I have to, this is where my brain's getting in the way. I know what his nose looked like, right? I know he had a quite large nose. So my brain's kind of getting in the way going, no, 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 it should go out here. It should go out here. We have to trust our measurements and go back and forth with the measurements, because your brain wants to do something completely different than what's there based on that. So I have to keep just fussing with it, right? I'm looking at this. Get that little crease there. All right. I have to go back to my stick. I'm getting too ahead of myself. I'm trying to do things, you know, between memory and vision of the photograph. Sometimes the translation gets a little too jumbled, and I can only go back to fact, right? Fact upon fact. I kind of crack up because both they had, my grandma and grandpa had 5 kids, my dad and 4 girls, and my dad and the youngest sister both had grandpa's nose. They both had a nose job, which is funny because they ended up having the exact same nose somehow after the nose job. I think I might have to just ghost sketch in some of his mouth, just so it's starting to look a little bit more like it's gonna work. Yeah, this is getting. All right, I need to get rid of this line. That's distracting. Ooh, something else I can check because I see something that's wrong. I totally see something that's wrong. All right, I'll tell you what's wrong. As I go, I always check different angles. It's not just necessarily a measurement of size, you know, size from ear to how many ears and whatnot. It's also, you can also check size based on angles. So if you look, if you go from the bottom of the earlobe to the tip of his nose, that creates a very specific angle. If your measurements are right, that angle will match. So I'm going to put my skewer on the 2 tips, flat against the paper, very gently come back to my paper. So either the nose is too long or the ear is too short. And since I've been using everything on the measurement of this ear, I'm going to go back with the nose is too long. So gone. This is why you can't get too attached to anything that you do. At any given moment, you might have to completely get rid of it. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go back and do a little bit of work there. Now I said I didn't want to put lips in, but I put a little bit of a lip in there for spacing. It is certainly not what his lips are going to look like, but I just wanted to get a little more spacing. So I'm going to go back to that angle, set my angle again. That seems really high. This is why this is tedious. This is why this takes so long. So when somebody says, why do you charge so much for a portrait? Well, if you want it to look like them, this is why. All right, so now I have to do some refiguring here. Make a couple of marks. I also have a bit of a shadow line. So the shadow line underneath the nose can cause a little bit of a distraction to what it looks like. I'm gonna take a different approach. So I'm frustrated with the tip of his nose. So I'm gonna kind of look at something else that has to do with his nose, but that can kind of move me forward a little bit, right? So I'm gonna double check the width of his face. So I checked the width. We did a T. I checked the overall length and the width from his hair to his hair. I didn't necessarily check the width of his cheek to ear. So I'm going to double check that. Make sure that this outer line is also still correct, right? And then I'm going to set the line of his nose. And that might help me break out of that tip of his nose issue that I'm having. So 1, 2, we're exactly 2 ears across. I have a feeling it's a little too wide. 1, it is too wide. So that also has been messing with the concept of the mouth, right? So if I'm struggling with where the tip of his nose should end because of the placement of his mouth, but if the whole side should be a little smaller, that would be why. So I'm going to do that again. It's 2 ears cross. So now I'm going to come from the ear backwards so I know where the line should be. Oh boy. Here we go. Do it from set that jaw. Not quite to. All right, so that's on. So this distance from this jawline to where it falls on his mouth is on. This it's like a gradual. I know that's too big. That feels long right there. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to keep talking you through some of the things that are going through my head and the things that I'm trying to work out. So you can block me out if it's a little too tedious, but I know this line goes out. No, kind of got it there. I feel like now that this space is a little too long, but it might not be. Let me measure again. So 1. Where am I going to choose from though? Oh, that's on. All right. It's not too long. You can tell when I start to get frustrated because my lines get like darker. I push a little harder, like it's gonna change things. Like if I just keep making the mark a little darker, everything will be fine. My grandpa always had a buzz cut and his hair just stood straight up on the top of his head. I don't even know how. But even when he only had like 3 hairs left on the top of his head, it was still just standing straight up. I'll kind of just get that a little bit marked in there. Again, as you guys know me, if I get frustrated, I move on to something else so I can come back with fresh eyes. So I'm just kind of doing that a little bit. I'll do something like block in a little bit of his ear, shape some of those shadows. Because what I want to get into, it's 10:41. So we have about an hour left. I want to get to that point where we get to some of the blocking in. Because if we don't get to it, we'll have a hard time getting to our portrait next week. So up to this point, we haven't even used any of the erasers. We've just been pushing in, right? We've been blocking everything in. We're still in the line drawing phase, the tedious line drawing phase. All right. So I'm getting his ear measurement again. I'm going to go from his outer cheekbone to the line of his nose. It's about halfway. Oh yeah, look at, wait, what? No. Hold on. Yeah, okay. And it's at an angle, so I'm just marking it. I don't feel like it's right though. Boy, that slight little smile, it's causing trouble. All right, so what I'm gonna do to take my mind off that trouble right now, I'm going to block in some of the shadowing that I see. So feel free to do the same if you're struggling a little bit and you just want to clear your eyes a little bit, just kind of start to block in some of the shadow shapes. We can always move them if they end up not being right. Although he doesn't have a lot of shadow, he's got a lot of like red tones, I guess. Yeah, that seems wrong. Some things that I'll look at too. I'm just gonna maybe place a little bit of the eyebrow, just start to. A little bit. See, that seems really long. This whole section seems like the middle seems long. So I'm gonna have to do that again. I'm gonna have to go straight up the middle another time and just check. Maybe I'll check the forehead. So it's one ear from the forehead to the brow. Oh, and it's on. See, that's what, it's still correct, but it feels wrong. And that's when, I get in trouble. Something isn't quite adding up. I'm gonna clear my eyes for just a second. I'm gonna pause. All right, so as we are getting a little low on time, and we're all working through all of this measuring and all of this line drawing, there's a really fun part that comes next, and that is blocking in the shadows and the nuances. So if you haven't worked with me in the charcoal before or in this method, I do use my fingers a lot. I have a tendency to use my fingers a lot. You can always use your blending stump just to kind of get things going. My blending stump is already dirty, right? So if I go use my blending stump, it's not going to do a whole lot. It's just going to help you move things around, maybe soften an edge. But if you have a brand new blending stump, it's going to take off the charcoal like you just went with an eraser. Okay, so blending stumps are great. At this point, what I like to do is I do a lot of adding in. So if I just focus on his mouth for a little bit, and I add in that little shadow below his lip there. If I want to take my kneaded eraser, I don't want to take off a lot of color. I just kind of want to soften some of that shadow. So I'll take a little bit of charcoal from the side and I'll get it a little bit dirty. So I can just kind of move it. It wasn't dirty enough, which is why I use my finger a lot. It's just taking more. And just start to soften and move things around. So he's got a couple of, he's got a little highlight on his nose. So I can take my vinyl eraser, just take a little bit off. I don't need to go crazy. So this is when, your erasers start to come into place and you do a little bit of drawing by removing. I know I'm going a little ahead of myself. I shouldn't be doing this just right now, but I'm kind of just wanted to show you. If I look at his ear, I can take my pencil eraser and I'm just using it to basically model, like as if I was sculpting, looking for the highlights. Looking to almost diminish the lines that we made. We want it to be nice, soft transitions where you almost don't even see the line anymore. And you just see light and dark. It's got this nice little glow right on there. So you've got all these little ins and outs of the ear. So as you can see, I just kind of modeled a little bit of the ear. Just got that started. That's the direction that we're going in. So with his hair, I'm just going to use my finger a little bit. He's got like that spiky little bits of hair. I'm gonna use my finger to kind of move it around. There's a nice dark shadow behind him, so I'll take and then it gets bright up here. So you can just kind of use your background to help also with your drawing. You can just kind of bring them forward a little bit because I had that shadow. Now it kind of just comes forward. And I'm looking at his shirt. His shirt is brighter than his skin, right? Oh, yeah, it is. So I want to tone his skin a little bit. Get that in there. I got some shadow shapes in the collar. And then I can take my kneaded eraser. It's got this little roll kind of thing going on. I'm not worried about whatever pattern is on there. Those are some collars back in the 70s. That's a big collar. It kind of is, if I'm looking at value, it kind of is like the brightest bit on the drawing. So I can erase even more out. I can make sharp lines. That's why I like the white vinyl eraser. You can make a nice sharp line if you need it. So you can kind of see like it's starting to develop a little bit. I don't obviously foresee me finishing it all before we're done with class, but we'll just keep working. And these are the bits of goals, is the tedious line drawing, all that measuring. He's got that little crease in his face. So this crease is really important because it connects a lot of things. So I have to be careful as to how I put that in there. I know it's really harsh right now, which is part of what we'll fix with the nuances. So with these like fine lines, I just take place them, and then I just soften them, my blending stump. I'm just kind of watching how they change. Like, this is probably not in the right place, but again, we're running low on time, so I just want to show you. I'll be adjusting. There's actual reflection on one side of it. So I softened it with the blending stump. And then I can just come back in with the eraser. Almost like a fold of fabric. Push that in a little bit. So my grandpa was a welder, and he worked on building the sky rises in Cincinnati. And so his skin was quite rough from years of being up on scaffolding way up in the sky. He had this little pattern on the back of his neck from the little crisscross pattern in the back of his neck from the deep creases. So his wrinkles, they were real. They were deep and well earned. So all that talk over the past, pastel lessons and whatnot on value, this is a great time to really observe value in the black and white form. Really picture where how the shadows gently move across the face. He's getting there. I need to put a lot more wrinkles in him. That's why babies are perfect to paint and draw. There's no wrinkles. And if they are, they're just little bits of chub. So they're rounded. I do love this eraser pencil. It is one of my favorite things to work with the charcoal. I've gotten it nice and dirty. You can see that looks like a pencil, right? Like an actual pencil, but that's just the little bit of charcoal that's on it that I'm using to kind of move things around too. And I'll turn it to the other side. Clean. It's almost like I'm kind of pulling them out of the dark a little bit. Yes, I'm still cowardly avoiding his eyes at this point. I'll get there, I swear. I'm almost kind of pulling the eyes out of the shadows. What I like to do as well is, same with the kneaded eraser, if I want to pull, I don't want to pull off too much, I'll use my finger and get my finger dirty so I can add some from one place to the next. I may not need a whole stroke from the stick, but I don't necessarily, I need a little bit, so you can use your finger to do that as well. And the thing about, all of this process and the charcoal and everything is you can just move it just the slightest little bit and it makes the hugest difference. But I feel like I don't personally have a lot of patience for pencil drawing. So this is a nice alternative for me. It can work a little faster. Looking a little bit like the Joker there for a second. Don't want to do that. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's getting there. He still looks like a family member. Maybe not like him, but he looks like he's related to us. I guess that's all that matters so far. Oh, wow. It's 11:10, so we have at least 20 minutes left. How's everybody feeling? I will certainly finish mine all the way before next week, so I'll have it to show you before. Obviously keep working now, but if you don't finish and you want to finish, I would love for you to finish. If you don't finish and you don't want to finish, don't worry about it either. I'm not going to take demerits off. But I do want you to get used to, the build of it, because the build of it is going to be really important for next week. We have to take our time to truly build you know, something out of nothing. You know, we've got this big old blank sheet of sanded paper in front of us, and we have to take our time to get to that finished product. I will certainly be rechecking all of these measurements as I just willy-nilly erase away and make what I think is right. Getting there. I'll check my email, see if anybody's got anything sent. And again, I do like, just like with pastel, I do like to use my fingers, soften things up a little bit. Work on that texture. And so that's what I'll do. Then I'll spread some more around, because sometimes the eraser takes off maybe a little too much, or maybe even a little harsher than you wanted it to. So now I'm smoothing it out just a little bit before I go back in, because the skin is not smooth. So I'm gonna have to have some texture in there, but it's a long process. I'm going to pause the recording. I don't think I really have much left to show. We went through the line drawing process, the measuring. Measuring is most important. Measure, measure, measure. I will continue to measure as I finish him up, because every little line and every little crease needs to be in its place. If it's not, then it's not him. So it's a person, it's not him. So that's what makes a portrait a portrait. We have to have that likeness. And in this format, it's a little more specific. When we get into the painting, we can make some more painterly marks, just like the painting of Sam and the live music. It can be a little more, you know, it's still Sam, but it's not a portrait. It's just a.
Renee, any suggestions for teeth?
Teeth. So teeth.
I have teeth in my picture. Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I'll do for you. I will get a little dark space. All right. So let's say teeth, you will have to count. You will have to place them. So what I'm kind of doing here, it's a little dark. Maybe I'll start up here. So I'm just kind of using my eraser to generally get them placed. And there's always going to be a little bit, you can kind of, it's like Cheshire Cat's kind of coming out of it. But my suggestion is more about, don't think of them as teeth. I don't know if she's got like a shadow in there or not. So you kind of need a little bit of color. If I say this is her lips. What I find is it's easier to kind of erase them out than it is to draw them in. Okay. So your
Okay.
first step is to really look at the overall shape of her mouth. I know her smile was pretty big. So if the overall
Yes.
shape of her mouth, then pull out the value. So
I think I have that. She has like a bit of gum on top too.
okay, a
So
bit of
it's-
gum. So, but the gum is most likely going to
A
be
different
darker than
value.
the teeth, right? So it's a value shift. You need to look at
Right. It's not as
what's
dark
the
as the lip.
brightest. Yeah. So, and
Okay.
with something like this, you don't have to be, don't individually draw them. Don't worry about the creases in between the teeth, the lines in between the teeth just yet. You can just kind of hint
Okay.
at them with that up and down motion. And then if you know, some of the creases are a little more obvious than others, and you can gently place one in. And if you have everything just right, then go ahead and grab a pencil, you know, but wait on that as long as you can, because once that pencil's in there, you're not moving it very easily. Because see, I'll wipe it all away and that pencil line is still there. So you don't want to get into that kind of trouble. So that pencil line would be once you know you're happy with them. But value first, the overall shape of the mouth, and then start to pull out the light little by little.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome. Let's see, we lost Kathleen. Oh, she sent me something. Oh, good start. I'm sorry she left. Okay. As usual, throughout this week, send me your progress. If you have questions or just want me to see, you can certainly do that. As I'm looking at mine, this whole eye needs to come down a little bit. So I'll be fussing and messing with this for a while. Like I said, if you don't want to finish it during the week, you don't have to. But the more you analyze and the more you understand the portrait that you're working on, the better time you'll have next week. When we go to put it on paper, we will cheat a little bit. So don't worry. There will be a little bit of cheating involved. But this step is super important before we get to the cheating. So my goal, one of my goals is, I'm looking at this screen. I like to soften some of these lines. You know, I don't want to look at the picture and just see lines. I want it to be a little bit more modeled. So that's something I like to work on. So I'll keep fussing. And see now his mouth is a little bit open. And I did not represent that well with that bottom lip. So I have to adjust that. That is weird. All right. How's everybody feel about today? Are we good?
This was hard for me.
It's
It's
hard.
Not
hard.
easy.
It's
Hard.
it is a hard
I'm gonna work
thing.
on it all week, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's good. I want you to, you know, work as much as you're comfortable working with. You know, don't pull your hair out, but certainly take some time and really study it and really study all of the, you know, when we're doing landscapes, I'm like, just put this here and put that there. You can move this, you can move that,
Right.
you know, you can make it a little more expressive. And once you put in something so specific, we have to just slow down to turtle's pace and figure it all out, you know?
Yes.
I mean,
This
go
is
ahead.
really detailed.
Yeah,
This is details. It really is a detail has to be exact.
yeah, yeah.
It's like mine looks like a girl, just not Maddie.
And that's what I'm hoping we can push out, is getting it to, like I said, right now, Grandpa looks like a member of the family, but not necessarily Grandpa. So that's what I have to get that to. And it'll take some time. The photograph does look like him. It's not like this situation where the one photo of Gabby didn't really look like Gabby. It was kind of a weird thing. But, you know, this definitely looks like him. So I can definitely try and figure out how to get it back to all the way him. Right now, he kind of looks like my brother. So, yeah, family member. So, but so remember, send me your stuff this week. Just have fun with it. Do not stress about it. Next week, like I said, we're going to cheat a little bit on the drawing part. So, you know, the drawing part is necessary. It's kind of like a muscle memory kind of a thing. So when we work it all out here, it's that much easier when we cheat next week. If you just start off with the cheating, it'll just be just as hard with a little bit of help. It's still going to be as hard. So with this out of the way, you'll have an easier time next week. Okay.
So are we keeping the same photo throughout?
Yeah, so that's the point. So we're going to do, we have 4 weeks. We're going to do 2 different portraits. Each one will be done in charcoal and then in pastel. That way you've worked out the kinks on this one. And then when you add color to it, you're better off with the color. Okay.
Okay. If you say so.
I say so. I have faith.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All right.
For the measuring, but I admire everyone else that does.
Do what with the measuring? You don't do measuring?
No, I know it's absolutely necessary, but I don't have the for it. It's like when my insurance guy used to want to give me details. I was like, please just let me sign the bottom line. And when I don't want to know. And this
Yeah.
is where I have to face my fears.
Well, another thing, you know, if you don't want to measure like ear and how many,
No, it's
the other part of it is to just like, okay, the angle, bottom of the earlobe to the corner of the mouth, those little angles, you know, when you go
right.
middle of the eye, those angles are super important. So even if you don't get to the size measurements, if you do those angles, the size kind of falls into place. So, you know, it is tedious to get 1, 2, 3, but the angles help too. So you can do that.
I just said I'm impressed by artists that have the perseverance to get it to be really finely attuned to that, as you are.
Well, thank you. I am nowhere, there are so many people that, you know, when you can truly tell when somebody only does portraits, because it's just like, you know, with us in landscapes, we do landscapes a lot quicker because it's second nature. You know, if you did only portraits, you could see everything so fast and you wouldn't even necessarily need the stick anymore, you know. But I don't see myself doing only portraits for the rest of my life. So I'll always be tediously taking my time and measuring things out. So,
Thank you so
are we
much.
still recording?
Right.
No, we're not recording. All right, guys,
All right.
enjoy your week.
Thank
And
you.